Pow'Er Hour Episode 5. I'm the host, POW Warpig. Thank you for joining us again tonight. And greetings to anybody that's watching this on the replay, the YouTubes, and the VODs. And if you're just new to Mixer and the channel tonight because you saw the show, thank you. Thank you for being here. Tonight, we have a lot of cats and an extra special episode lined up. This is going to be entertaining, needless to say. We'll be talking everything Crowfall tonight. There's going to be no news announcements, nothing else going on, just Crowfall. And the best part is we have some fantastic help from design lead Thomas Blair, aka Blixtev, to fill us in and teach us everything we need to know. Go ahead, take it away, sir.
Howdy, everybody. I'm Thomas Blixtev Blair, and I am the lead designer for Crowfall. And I've been doing that now for a little over 3 years. I think we've been working on this project now. Our Kickstarter ended 3 years ago and like 2 weeks. So, yeah, we've been working at this a bit over 3 years now.
It's been a long 3 years, but it's been great watching the game come along.
Well, I mean, most MMOs you're looking at 4 to 5 years because there's just so much stuff to build.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just everything.
I feel like you're building an entire city with just your hands, just like, oh god, brick by brick. So if you guys haven't, go ahead and hit up Crowfall website, go to the YouTube. They've got tons of videos, just constant updates to transparency on giving out information and just letting people know what's going on with the game. The character development stuff is like top notch. I can't commend this team enough on like all that extra work, just that little bit that you don't see other MMO companies do or anything. It means a lot to me, just being an old schooler, seeing somebody care that enough to just be like, look, here's this class. It may change, but here's what we got. And this is what we're doing with it. It's really refreshing. So thank you and your team for all that extra work you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different than building a game for a large publisher, because normally you guys wouldn't get to see anything. And we've been pretty much transparent since day one. And we do our twice a weekly update. Sometimes there's a third one, a founders update in the middle of the week from Todd and Gordon. And we're constantly just showing people behind the velvet rope. And what's interesting is some people are really receptive to that, and others just don't understand. They'll come in and they'll think it's a finished product. And we even saw that 3 years ago when we first opened Hunger Dome, which was our first playable with combat and kind of an arena. Basically what the Battle Royale mode before everybody started doing Battle Royale as their game. It was funny because we were doing that 3 years ago, and it's like, huh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been kind of one of the DNA pieces of the studio is that we show everything. We really don't hide much of anything. And people can stay with us, and some have since the beginning. And believe it or not, their input has steered us in a lot of ways. So normally, when you're working on a big MMO for a large publisher, you don't start to get that feedback until that fourth year. And at that point, you've pretty much built most of everything. So course correcting at that point is very difficult because you're pretty much going to do what you're already doing.
Mm. We all know who's wearing the pants right now is the cats. They got total control. It's awesome.
Yes, we foster a lot of cats around here, and we have adopted many of our fosters, and they're just our cats now.
That's awesome. Cats are fun, the kitties. So we keep mentioning Crowfall and everything that's going into it, but for those that don't even know what it is or anything, how do you want to introduce what they can expect Crowfall to be?
Well, just from a really high-level view, Crowfall is a combination of an MMORPG and a strategy game. We inherit a lot of elements from Shadowbane for people who played Shadowbane. We inherit a lot of elements from EVE and RPGs in general. And then there's a whole series of action combat stuff that we inherit because Mark Hallish is one of our principal designers, and he and I both worked on DC Universe Online. I was a lead systems designer, and he was a combat designer. And we kind of, I went over to Crowfall first and laid the groundwork, and then he came over about a year and a half later, and it's just that was our last game. So a lot of the things that we've built, we try and make it better in the next game you build, right? I mean, that's what you do. You just keep trying to make it better and better. So we are MMORPG RTS, not like StarCraft RTS, but a strategy game where gathering resources is very important. The players will go into 2 and 3 month campaigns, and at the end of that time, the worlds will explode, and your crow is basically the soul of your character, and he contains all of the learning that you have from our passive skill system, which is where we inherit a lot from Eve, and that will persist with you from campaign to campaign. Every player also has an eternal kingdom, which is basically your home, where you can build castles and all kinds of structures, put some content in there. You're actually not just placing a house like a traditional housing game. I mean, you're showing some of the housing over there. That these are houses you can put on the land that you're terraforming. So you actually get to build your own home world. So it has a cell limit, and we have some crafting professions that can build the land parcels that go down. They look like Tetris pieces. So you actually get to build the land. Think of a Minecraft server, if you will, in creative mode, right? And then you can put structures on there. You can invite your friends into those places, and you can rope off basically an area for them to build in if you want to as well. So they can put houses down. Where that is all going is right now we're currently working on our vendor system, and we're building vendors a la Ultima Online, for those of you who ever played Ultima Online, where you would build a shop, and you would put vendors there, and you would put goods on them, and part of your daily gameplay was making sure your vendors had enough stuff to sell. So the next level of the Ultima Online shop was the Star Wars Galaxy shops, and people would make malls. And I totally expect what's going to happen is in the Eternal Kingdom, somebody will have the most popular one, and they will start vassaling out their land, and basically Walmart's going to form in a couple of these Eternal Kingdoms. Because that's where you're going to go shopping. We don't have system vendors selling you swords.
Yeah.
All of the swords are crafted. So you have to find a crafter's vendors to buy stuff or be a crafter yourself. So that flow will lead from the Eternal Kingdoms into the campaigns, which you're basically trying to win the campaign, and as a secondary part of that, you're trying to pull as much resources out of there that you can either sell or craft into other goods for future campaigns. Now, we maintain the flow of goods into these campaigns. We have something called the import-export, and basically you can bring a limited amount of things into a campaign, and the winners can bring a whole bunch of stuff out. Their export limits go up. So you get rewarded for winning, and the stuff that you build outside and buy in, let's say, the Walmarts, you can bring into other campaigns. Now, we have a kind of world that we call the dregs, which we basically say you can only take in a level 1 character naked. So it's Terminator rules, right? You go through the portal naked, and you can't bring stuff out and in, basically, except we have some subsystems that will handle that, but I'm not going to really go into kind of how the seasons and things work in there.
It's genius. It's all genius.
Well, so part of the genesis of this game was Todd had made Shadowbane. So J. Todd Coleman is our creative director, and he had made Shadowbane, and they noticed during beta of Shadowbane that they'd have a huge spike every time a fresh world came up. So the worlds would be flooded, and then gradually the population of every world will go down. Well, that's a normal curve that you see in any MMO.
Mm-hmm.
But in Shadowbane, when someone killed your city, essentially by taking out your tree of life and sieging your city, it was a quit moment. So people would bail as soon as they lost. What ended up happening at that point is 1 or 2 big guilds would own that entire server. So for the smaller guilds, it wasn't a lot of fun because there were big bullies on the block that could come over and kick over your sandcastle at any time. Yeah. So back to our Kickstarter video, I played a role called Uncle Bob, we described a Risk game, and the game of Risk doesn't get fun when somebody has been dominating the board for a long time, right? Everybody else is kind of sitting around waiting for the game to end. You know you're never going to win, And when that situation happens in an MMO, your only option is pretty much to quit or join them, right? So then it gets even less fun for the winners because now the winners have nobody to fight, right? So there's nobody left to fight. So that led Todd into thinking, you know what? If we could replicate that huge spike of initial activity every couple months, then there wouldn't be time for somebody to dominate for so long and basically force everyone else to quit the game, because that's what happened when you lost your city in Shadowbane, right? Is you just quit the game. So if you knew that the world was somewhat permanent but also somewhat transient, then you were gonna you do it. You play like an MMO, and you're like, all right, someone's dominating. Pretty much that should happen near when the world is ending. The world explodes, and then you can do it over again. And then I came in with well, let's borrow some of the Eve lessons, which is you can have a soul, is what we called it in the beginning, was your immortal soul, but that turned into the crow, and the crow is what stores all of your long-term progression, right? So you bring stuff out of there, but you're always making advancement on the crow, and it's passive training. So folks that, I mean, we all have busy lives. We all have, some people are still raising their kids, and they can only play a couple hours, even though probably in our college or high school days we could play games 24/7. Well, MMOs didn't exist when I was in high school, but they definitely did at the end of college years. And there's other things you have to do, so you can't play a game 24/7. And there's so many games to draw everybody's attention. So with the passive training, you can start training and keep making significant advancement while you're sleeping, while you're working, right? While you're taking care of your family. So that kind of keeps everyone somewhat within reach of their friends, right? There's nothing more frustrating when you start playing a game with your friends and you have to take the kids out or watch the kids or do whatever, work late nights, and all of a sudden you fall behind by 3 to 5 levels, and now you can't even group with your friends.
Yep.
Right? So they keep powering on. You're trying to play this game of catch up. No fun, because now you're doing everything by yourself. And I mean, MMOs are community-based games, right? So it's all about, you play what your friends are going to play. You play with your friends. And when your friends get bored and move on to something, you typically move on with them, right? I mean, that's a play pattern we've seen over the years, and it's pretty established. So part of the passive skill system was to help keep people feeling like they were within striking range of each other, because it's no fun to play by yourself.
Absolutely not. And that's the thing that I like most about the whole system is the incentives that you have behind like every little system that's going into place for that checks and balance between the campaigns ending and stuff being stored still. There's just so much incentive around everything. It's hard to grasp how well that's going to all play out, because I've never had a game do that for me. That like,
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, this is the first like game that's really bringing all of this stuff together in that way. And it sounds so unique and so crazy, but it's like, at the same time, it's exactly what myself and a lot of other people have wanted. So, you know, that's awesome.
Yeah, the challenge will be, hopefully it'll work like that, right? Because we have lots of ideas, and this is how we're trying to build systems such that this system causes people to do this, which causes them to do this, which means it will all work together. We haven't, or seeing it all play out, we haven't done yet because we still don't have the full game loop built. We've largely been building large systems and putting them up on our live service, and people can test pieces of it. But what's great about where we are now after the 3-year mark is things are starting to actually mesh and play together. For example, this week we released 5.4 to our live servers. It's our most recent build. And I had an idea years ago that when people would go harvesting, they would go harvesting as a team, right? So if you look at MMO harvesting in general, it's usually a solo dude cruising around a map, whacking a node, and just basically jamming out to some music in an endless circle of the nodes that he's trying to find. I had an idea for, hey, wouldn't it be great if I could go out with my friends and we could harvest nodes as a team, And it would be more like the Eve fleet mining ops for anyone who's familiar with that, where there are a bunch of support ships, there's a bunch of people mining, there's some combat ships, and then there's the group leader who's giving buffs to everyone who's harvesting. They're blowing up the rocks, there's people gathering the rocks, pirates are coming and they're fighting off the pirates. So based off of a vision statement like that, in Crowfall, we created the motherlode nodes. And these are the large nodes that you see in the videos that you're playing over here they're at least 5x the size of the smaller nodes, and you cannot harvest those by yourself. You actually have to have two people to break them down. And there's a lot of other things going on there, but this week when 5.4 went live, I actually was watching a Twitch stream of a group, there were 7 of them.
I was with you watching it, yeah.
Yeah, and they were clearly, the nodes were too hard for them because they were ranked 7 and 8 nodes, and they were all newbie characters. They were going through lots of picks, but as a team, they were breaking those rocks. They had one Ganetian who was gathering all of the stuff that was coming, all the dubers is what we call those, all the dubers that were coming out of there, because his job was basically to go into stealth mode if they got jumped. So that way they wouldn't lose any of their resources. That's why he was running around picking up everything and everybody else wasn't, because they didn't want to lose the stuff that they were getting. They were pooling all the resources to build intermediate weapons, which you need crafting dust for. So they were working as a fairly well-organized team. The harvesting was working as a team, and it was great to see that. They said they hadn't played for more than 2 weeks, so they played a little bit of 5.3, and then 5.4 came up. And it was just awesome as a designer to see something that I thought could happen actually play out exactly as I saw it happening in my head when I imagined it long ago. And it's cool to see that happen when it does happen, because a lot of times the only feedback we get are the forums, and people generally go to the forums when they're super unhappy with something or something is broken. You generally don't hear the positives when things are working right. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the great things about this kind of streaming era, is that we actually get to see people playing. And normally you'd have to go to like a focus group test. In the old days, you'd call in a bunch of kids and they would sit behind the one-way glass and you'd watch them play a very scripted thing, and you'd have to make a bunch of decisions based off of that. In the streaming era, I can just over here have a stream up while I'm playing my games or doing a little bit of work, and I can watch what people are doing, and that will inform decisions that I make that may be completely different than what people are saying on the forums. Because usually when they go there, they're upset, mm-hmm. or something is broken.
Yeah, and you're seeing their initial like perception and interpretation of what they should be doing and stuff, like their reactions to the environment. And they looked like, they had it all together. They were running around to the giant rocks, and they were taking care of business as a group. It was really slick to watch. And I was like, so that's what you're supposed to do with all that stuff is, and again, it just stresses the whole having a group, being together, and, that community building. And that's what I think Crowfall is like. It's just one of the big strong points is the game is everything on it is just so community based, and your gatherers and crafters and stuff are just going to be as important as people that are good at killing players. They're pivotal.
That was you're not as familiar with Star Wars Galaxies as okay. So one of the things in Star Wars Galaxies was we built that game, and there was 3 spheres, as we called them. There was the combat sphere, the crafting sphere, and the harvesting sphere. And like a giant Venn diagram, they all kind of, I'm sorry, the entertainer was the 3rd sphere. The crafting harvesting was its own sphere. And all 3 of them met in the center. It was like a Venn diagram, and they had a little bit of overlap, and they each had their own unique areas of gameplay. But at the end of the day, they all meshed together because the entertainers healed the combatants' mind wounds. And the doctors, who were also over here, healed the combatants' regular wounds. The crafters fed the economy with the crafted goods that they made, right? There wasn't any vendors in that game until there wasn't any vendors that sold system goods, is a better way to look at it. There was player vendors, but there wasn't, armor wasn't being sold by vendors. In fact, if a rare piece of armor dropped, it dropped from a limited edition blueprint that you could only make like one helmet off of it. So you would actually go farm schematics for blueprints for the player crafters to make these things, and they would make limited edition versions of them. But again, nothing was sold. So if you wanted to set like the Boba Fett armor, which is Mandalorian armor, it dropped in a specific place, but it dropped as schematics, and you would take those to the crafter, and they would actually craft that into a thing. So everybody met kind of in the center, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do with our overall gameplay loop is the combatants are out there killing stuff, and for us, our two spheres are the harvesters and the crafters. And the harvesters have, I mean, as you saw, they now have a pretty good action harvesting mechanic. It's not just simply go up, hit F to interact, and just kind of watch a timer. Yep. There's an active mini game in there now, and there's a lot of important stats they can gear their character for. So they have just as much of a game as the combatants do. And then the crafting game, which we're now starting to go through its revision to. Basically, every one of our systems has had the combat system has had multiple revisions. Harvesting has had multiple revisions. The crafters have had one pass through. So now we're getting ready to ramp in and go through their second pass and give them some disciplines and give them some cool stats. And everybody will have a very important role within Crowfall. So you're going to need to bring harvesters and crafters into the campaign, especially in those Dregs campaigns, which Terminator rules. You have nothing in the beginning. So very similar to a strategy game, the team that out-resources the other game is going to have a significant advantage. Oh, right? Yeah. I mean, you know, in an RTS, if you lose the resource race, you just have less units. So the way that translates into Crowfall, you're going to have less armor. You're going to have less weapons. When you have a keep, your keep is going to have less defended walls because maybe you didn't get all your walls up in time. So yeah, you probably haven't seen it much of that style of gameplay, which is the going to the points of interest, pulling out these big giant, we call them materials. They're kind of a level above resources, and the materials are used to build up the walls around the keeps. Right now you want the keeps because that's where all our advanced crafting stations are. So if you want to craft an advanced weapon or an advanced set of armor, you need to own a keep. So that gives you reasons, which is great because for the last year, even though we've had the beginnings of the MMO world up, we didn't have crafting stations, and there was no reason to hold these things. But now, as more and more game systems come online, there's more and more reason to venture out into the world as a team and capture forts and keeps and keep them as your own and drive other people away. I think somebody in chat mentioned that. They're like, it's starting to come together now that these things are coming online.
It actually leads into some of the questions. How will castle sieges work? And is this something that will be an event oriented, or will be open all the time for attacks?
So our second gameplay mode, so after Hunger Dome, which was our Battle Royale mode, we put that on ice when we started to bring our destruction technology online. And that game mode we called Siege Perilous. And Siege Perilous was two teams. You would start on either Order or Chaos. Yep. And one team would start inside the keep, and one team would start outside the keep. The team inside the keep, their only job is there's a tree of life on the top of the keep, and their goal is to keep the other team from destroying the tree of life. Okay? The attacking team has 3 giant trees at different corners of the keep. They're called Banewood trees. And the attacking team has to make sure all 3 of those don't die. So if the attackers are the defenders are really strong, they can push out and destroy those the Banewood trees, and that ends the siege and they win. So the attackers need to blow up the walls, fight through the keep, get to the top of the keep, and destroy that tree of life. And they have 1 hour to do it. So those are the rules of that game mode. Now, the defenders have ballista on the walls. The ballista does a lot of damage to siege vehicles and players. They basically drop these big giant AoE fields of death. And then the attackers have catapults that they can make as their siege vehicles, and they can basically blow up the walls. They can blow up the ballista, and a lot of times the defending team has to jump outside of the keep because you can put the catapults right outside ballista range, and they can still attack. Mm-hmm. So you can see where this is all going. It's basically the rules of siege warfare. Now, right now we have testing rules in there. So when the first Banewood tree goes down, we have like a 5-minute prep time now before the siege starts. Ultimately, when you plant a Banewood tree, there's going to be a handshake where the attacking team says, all right, we want to siege tomorrow at 3 in the morning. And I, as the defender, can go, no, that time's bullshit. The siege is going to be at noon tomorrow because that's when my people are on, right? So the defender gets to respond with the time that the attack happens. And if we don't respond, then the attack just happens at 3 a.m. So at that point, the city will go vulnerable. The walls will become attackable because prior to this, the city isn't attackable at all. You can't attack the walls. The walls they take no damage. Once the siege starts in that window, the hour countdown starts, UI elements go up, and it's the same goals as we had in Siege Perilous. Destroy the Tree of Life, defend the Tree of Life, or outlast by an hour, right? Nice. And at that point, if the tree is down, a new device spawns there, and you can put in things to take it over and plant your own Tree of Life, which will be nasty if you lose a keep because your crafting stations are in there. Eventually, we're going to allow people to put different types of houses in there so that they can put up shops and other things, guards, and you're going to lose all that. So building up a keep is going to be something that you're going to want to do, right? Because you don't want to lose it, and it will have, even points for winning the campaign. So don't lose keeps.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so much amazing stuff. That's like, so you want to be able to be strong, so you want to build it up, so you have all this stuff at your to industrialize all your crafting and everything. I mean, it just goes hand in hand. Again, it's incentives for what you're doing. Everything has a reaction to make it better and stronger and keep it going. How does the crafting and gearing work in terms of RNG? And will this keep the balance in check?
Okay, so our crafting is a system very similar to Galaxy's crafting. Where ours is unique is all of our subcomponents have stats on them. And when you craft a higher component in the crafting tree, those stats carry up. So if you're used to typical MMO crafting systems, you basically open up a little UI and it tells you what you're going to make. And it says, do you have these things in your inventory? You hit the go button and it makes just a templated object. This thing always does 50 to 100 damage. It has 25 strength and 25 constitution, for example.
Yeah.
So in Crowfall, you use the resources. So you saw the ore that they were gathering the other night. With ore, you're going to make metal bars. And that metal bar will have stats based on the combinations of materials you use. So if you use copper, copper, copper in your metal bar recipe, the item will have attack power and critical hit chance. If you use copper, tin, copper, it may have attack power and critical hit damage. And if you use tin, copper, the recipe might come out with support power, which is our healing stat, and critical hit chance. So basically, you can pick what you want for the stats for the metal bars. 3 metal bars, they have their stats. You make a long blade with those 3 metal bars. The long blade gets the stats of all 3 of those metal bars. And again, you customized it, and then you make a hilt. Well, the hilt takes 3 subcomponents. Each of those take a metal bar, or one of them takes a plank or a piece of leather. And the stats from those carries into the hilt. When you combine the hilt with the blade, you get the sword, and all of the stats bundle in there, and you end up with this really cool thing that you just customized the hell out of because you had all of these sub-crafting steps where you could customize.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a little mini game in there with crafting. It's more of an RPG style game where it's not like EverQuest 2 kind of combat crafting. It's more like I did a puzzle by raising my stats. I guess you figured out what are your best stats. What is the best way to make experimentations on these things? And there's a stage where you can put points at experimentation levels, and those points come back as a success, an amazing success, a great success, and that makes the items better. And if you hit a failure, it makes them worse. So crafters have a whole lot of ways to customize these weapons. So the better teams will have good crafters making great stuff. They have the standard quality levels that you're used to by now: gray, white, green, blue, purple, orange. qualities of stuff. As the stats go up, the rolls get better, the items get better. However, everything decays in Crowfall. So that sword that's your favorite sword is going to have to get replaced at some point. In fact, depending on the campaign you're fighting in, it may get looted from your corpse.
Oof.
When you die.
And that's how we balance PvP. That goes into the next thing. Knowing this game is going to have the attachment of it being a hardcore PvP game and an MMO genre, like it's just inevitable. How do you plan on keep the player power levels in check so new players coming in won't feel overwhelmed?
Well, so one of the challenges there is to keep our stat system feeling meaningful and kind of flat at the same time. So that was one of the things that we did on DC Universe Online, which was we had a relatively shallow power curve. And by shallow, I mean the traditional MMO power curve. So if you look at something like WoW, a level 1 character versus a level, 110 character now?
Yep.
He will literally do a swing of auto attack, and that will kill a level 1 character. Right? There's absolutely no challenge there, because basically my numbers are bigger than your numbers, and I just smash you by the virtue of those numbers being like you don't even have to do an ability. You just walk up and auto attack. And
logs the player out for him. Yeah.
Right. So in games like that, what they try and do is they try and create little buckets, and you only fight people within that bucket, so it's somewhat fair, right? There's like a level 1 to 10 bracket, an 11 to 20, a 21 to 30 bracket for all other PvP arenas. I don't think they've introduced auto scaling yet. But anyways, how we're combating that is pretty much everybody starts with the same amount of health, and everyone starts with the same amount of attack power. Now, classes have a certain amount of skew within them. Obviously, our more DPS classes have a little more base attack power, and our tanks have a little more base attack health. And our skill system feeds into that. But again, the values are fairly small. And that's the line that we're trying to walk, is to make those values feel good, as well as ensure that they don't get out of control, where a elder player is 1,000 times more powerful than a newbie player. Right. So that is definitely a challenge. And putting a lot of that available power into the item system to ensure that if you have a newer player, and ideally guilds are picking up newer players because they're always trying to replenish their ranks, that they can give him gear and he can be pretty well on par. Now, because it is action combat and we have dodge rolls and we have all kinds of placed fields and things, since it's not auto attack and an ability rotation exclusively like you would see in a tab targeting style combat system, there is a bunch of player skill involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You'll have noticed that you don't tab to target anything in Crowfall. You attack what's under your reticle.
Yep.
Right? So there is a degree of aiming skill that is required. So in a lot of cases, a new player may pick that up fairly quickly. Now, this argument is a classic argument and is somewhat a straw man. I'm sorry, I got cat hair that keeps tickling my eye. But in reality, a new player in any game is always just going to be learning, and they're probably not going to be looking to get into PvP action until they have a little bit of experience.
Yep.
So by newer player, I mean somebody in their first couple weeks, not literally their first game session, going and fighting a veteran player. Right? Because the veteran player in a skill system, he's going to know how to dodge roll. Yeah. A brand new player may not even know that his right click is a dodge roll.
Yeah.
Right. So we also don't meter out your powers. We give you a base kit of powers that are representative of what we think that class should be. Like a knight has a bunch of shield bashing and blocks as his base kit. And then as you advance, you will start to learn about things called disciplines, which are essentially mini classes. And these mini classes will add more powers to the class that you're playing. And we've been pretty liberal with who can use what. Meaning, if you're a tank, you can take some of the healing disciplines and you could be a more defensive-y healer type, assuming you also skewed all your gear towards support power. So because of our extreme customization in gear, we also have extreme customization in our classes and how you can progress them. You can mix the two things, and people will constantly be looking for cooler new builds. It's the hope that we do that.
Yeah.
It's also cool from a dev side where we can have an idea for, I have a really strong, or let me think of this. I have this great idea for 4 really strong powers. And 4 powers isn't enough to make a class, but it's enough that they work together. So Bard, which is something I created over a weekend, was, hey, here's 4 Bard songs that I think would be really strong. Now, that's not strong enough to make a class out of, but on a discipline, I've now put those 4 powers. You take that discipline, and now you have access to those 4 powers, and you can use any number of those powers if you just want one of those powers, and it's interesting because you'll find that a lot of our builds are fairly unique. People obviously like Arcane Archer is one of ours right now, which is basically a magical archer, and people really like it because he's got a distance AoE route. So everyone's taking that discipline because they really like that one power. Plus, they like to be able to shoot from range. So I have no doubt that things will we'll have some powers that are out of control, and we'll have to balance them over time. And we're kind of keeping track as to what people are playing.
Yeah, the class building is awesome. The class building, I like having a lot of freedom in terms of class building, and you guys definitely have that coming our way. So if people like to not be pigeonholed, this game's going to be offering that, and combos too, like with the abilities. And you start attacking even with the free combat. For those that don't know, like you'll get visual cues that pop up to, like, use this ability next to do this, or this ability to do that. Things like that will happen, and it can change your combat drastically. And I mean, it's very engaging of a system to play with that and have that. So
yeah, so we've built at this point. What's great is we've been building classes now for 3 years because we've been every day something goes by that we add something into the combat system, and we've been building our classes for that full time now. And as we've gotten better, we've made better powers, and we've made different styles of class. So our earlier characters, like the Knight, he's got a lot of powers that tree into each other. So his onslaught combo is 4, and he presses 4, and it has a very specific animation. And then he's got 2 lines. He can go 4A or 4B. We call them the A line and the B line. So he can press 4 again, or he can press E now, and he'll advance 1 in the combo. And off of that power, it trees into another power. So his A line in this case trees into an AoE conal knockdown. So he'll knock down everybody in front of him if he goes 4-4-4. If he goes 4EE, that second E power is an AoE attack that does a lot of damage, and I believe it's got a bleed on it now. So we did a lot of powers in the beginning like that because it was a great way to telegraph what was coming, right? So if you see a Knight do that very specific move, you know his next move is going to be the overhead knockdown. So at that point, you can dodge roll out of the way. It's a lot of action-based mechanics, which is I see what you're going to do, and I can react appropriately. Or because we actually made a crossover in there, you might do the AoE bleed because we actually let both of those second tier ones tree into the other one. So it's a very common thing in action games. And then our more recent classes have a lot of more traditional style MMO power interplays where power 1 interplays with power 5, right? Basically like an ability rotation. So we have both style of classes, which is great because what that means is when you think you've exhausted one class style and you've mastered that one, and you might want to pick up another one, they will feel different from each other, right? One of since we're so, I guess the best way to put this is one of our pillars is customization, that we don't want people to feel like everybody else. We don't want the classes to be homogenized, because if you look at a lot of the more recent MMOs, at the end of the day, everybody gets a heal and everybody gets a damage spec and everybody gets this thing. And at the end of the day, they all feel pretty much like it's just a degree of vanilla different left or right, but you're still eating vanilla, right? Yeah. And you kind of want some rocky road in there. You want a marshmallow, you want a chocolate chip, right? And you want those different flavors and those different mechanics. So I'm happy with where a lot of our stuff has ended up, because you can do that. And because of, so I didn't go into earlier that your crow, which is your soul, right? That's where all of your
stored,
right? That actually goes into different vessels, which are what the characters are. So you can have, basically, that's why we have the necromancy profession. Necromancy literally makes characters. They make vessels. So you will craft a human, or you will craft a minotaur, or you'll craft a centaur. And when I take one of those things to the crypt and I imprint it to me, I pick a class for that minotaur of the available class lists. And when I level, there's 30 levels now that we offer via the sacrifice system on for throwing away old items into the brazier to the gods, or for killing NPCs. That minotaur levels. And then I can go back to the crypt and I can jump into my human knight, and I'm still have all of the benefits of all of my skill training. So it's not like you're building a bunch of unique characters like you would see in an MMO, and you basically jump between the different characters. You are always you. You're always that crow. Oh. And that crow basically leaps into the different bodies. If you remember, I guess Quantum Leap, or he was just constantly leaping into different people. Your crow is going in and taking over this vessel, and then you put disciplines in that level, you customize their looks, you level them. They will all feel unique and different from each other. So somebody may have in their crypt, they may have 5 different versions of human knight. And since I mentioned crafting before, and I mentioned item quality before, can you see where I'm going with that one? Vessels have item qualities. So you can have a blue vessel, you can have an epic purple vessel. So basically, we've given the character that you play a quality level. So people are always going to be looking out for the best quality crafted vessel that they can get. In fact, the crafting system, we have additives that are optional pieces at each of the stages, and you can put those in to make that item better. So for example, you could loot the master's hands, and the master's hands are crafting additives that you use on the arms of a vessel that you're making. Or you can get enhanced eyeballs, or you can get, I think the centaur he can get an enhanced heart and an enhanced stomach, so he eats less food, right? So there's all kinds of ways that you can trick out your character even before you start dealing with equipment, which is what's really cool about our character system. And when you find a higher quality one, you may just be like, well, this white quality vessel that I got when I started the game, it's time to upgrade. I'm jumping in, and now I'm going to level that one and get disciplines to go whatever way I want with him. So what that means is you're constantly making and leveling lots of vessels because you're finding new ones. It's like finding an item upgrade. So
that's awesome.
And for the crafters, it gives them a lot of fun things to craft. And for the harvesters, to get body parts, you have to go to a graveyard and you dig up graves, and they spew body parts everywhere. It was funny was I built the vessel and the vessel crafting system, not this Christmas, but the Christmas before. So it was Christmas time, all this holiday stuff was going on, and I'm dealing with body parts and restoring basically mummified remains and additions like eyeballs and hearts. And it was pretty gruesome, but
happy holidays.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm really happy where that system ended up. Really, I can't think of another game that lets you actually craft the characters And because our crafting system has so much customization in it, you can skew these characters anyway. So when I mentioned earlier about the knight who wants to heal because he wants to take a bunch of healing disciplines, he can get a human body that is skewed towards spirit rather than skewed towards strength. Because we have top level attributes, strength, dexterity, constitution, intellect, and as you increase those stats, there's a bunch of children's stats underneath them that also increase. So, I mean, some of the older RPGs have obviously had stat systems like that. And so what that means is you can make a human vessel that has very high spirit and very high constitution, and that character, when you make it, will have a lot of support power and a lot of health. So,
well, that goes into is the plan still for the campaigns? Like, if you build your character, your vessel, this is some Ghost in the Shell shit right here. This is crazy, seriously. But so you build your vessel one light. You're going like strength and stam, and then you get one that's like spirit and stam for the next campaign, because the next campaign might warrant that kind of a different play out of you, right? Is that
right.
still something that's so there's like that's the thing, is people worried about there's so many different ways to build your character, and that means there's like, maybe there's more, there's still only going to be some cookie cutters. That's not the case. This game is not going to have that kind of situation come about. Again, crafting, your items will deteriorate, so you're going to need to replace stuff. People can loot stuff off you depending on what you're doing, and then the campaigns change, so you may be doing hot one campaign, and the next campaign you might be bumming for a little bit until you get yourself in the right place with a new vessel and some new crafted stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't mention this earlier, but the campaigns are kind of a designer's dream, because each campaign will have a series of knobs that we will go ahead and spin a certain number of ways before the campaign comes up. Each campaign will be unique. So what that means is you will go into a campaign and there will never have been a campaign, and there will never be another campaign that is exactly like that one. The worlds are procedurally generated out of these tiles that we're building ahead of time. So each of the continent maps that get built on there will be different from each other. And then the rules that we make at the top level of the campaign that I talked about, like, let's just say there's no metal at all in this campaign. So all of a sudden, I've just cut out an entire swath of the tech tree. That means if there's no metal, there's no plate armor.
Oof.
There's no metal weapons, which means that you'll want to be a caster, or you'll want to
archer,
be a leather type. Yeah, you can make basic arrows without metal, right? Okay. So all of these combinations will mean that different things happen. So if we say, you know what, no races can be used in this campaign except Stoneborn, which is our dwarf-like character, and elves, because we just want to see dwarves and elves fight, which means all of a sudden I've just cut out a bunch of classes, because a lot of classes can't play as dwarves and elves. So because we do this at the campaign level, you'll go into a campaign and you'll be like, hey, you remember the time that we fought the dwarves and elves? And they're like, yeah, that was badass. And somebody will be like, yeah, we had a campaign that was Minotaur and Centaur only. Or the one that there was no wood in, right? You couldn't get any wood, right? Or there was no stone. Or basically, or there was full loot, there was no loot. These are all knobs that we have available to us at the campaign level. So it will create interesting memories for people who go to play these things, and completely unique experiences, hopefully, such that it always feels fresh, right? Because that's what people are always looking for, right? But the persistent element is your character constantly gets better, your crow does, through every single campaign. You pull stuff out of there as the winner, and that means your Eternal Kingdom gets better and cooler every time you win a campaign. And maybe you find some cooler vessels.
Are you guys deciding the campaigns, or is it going to be on the players to decide? Okay.
Yeah, so we'll spool up the initial ones, and we'll see how the players behave, and kind of like natural selection, the better campaign models will get promoted, and the weaker ones that nobody liked, we won't use those settings ever again. Because maybe the no metal idea is terrible, right? I don't know. But what I do know is a standard MMO never has an option like this. So regular MMOs launch, however they launch is what players' expectations are, and you can't change those. Right? At that point, anything you do to your game world is either a huge nerf. Oh my God, I can't believe they took metal away from us. They took metal away, right? So for us, we have an opportunity to have that one unique campaign that had no metal, right? So it's super exciting for us, especially, like I said, as game designers, because we can try all these things out, and normally you can't do that on an MMO team. You're not allowed to, because the game launches, people have their expectations set. This is what this game is, and if you change that model, then you risk losing your player base. But the core of our game is designed that we can do that.
Yeah. Expectations going in is change. So,
right.
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. I'm expecting you to say all of them because I know how much work goes into all of these stuff. But what's your favorite class to play and its race? Like, what's your favorite, your flavor?
So, all of them, and as for the races, I'm a big fan of the Nathari right now, because I've been playing since we just built Assassin. I'm coming fresh off the Assassin, so the Nathari Assassin, because the Nathari racial dodge power is a dash, a really long distance one, and I really like the Nathari dash. We don't have all of our races yet. We still have one more class to build called the Frostweaver, and we haven't built the Stoneborn, the High Elf, and there's a bunch of female varieties that are coming online now that people are going to start seeing for a lot of our races.
Awesome.
But most of the races have been built, but I've been playing that one a lot recently because, again, I just had to tune and play the crap out of the Assassin. But I mean, the Minotaur is great. You know, the cool thing about Crowfall, I think I told Todd this. I'm like, you know what? We could delete all the humans and elves in this game, and we could just go with the Centaur, the Minotaur, the Ganetian. Just right off the bat, those three. The Elkin, which is our deer guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have some really unique monster races just right off the bat.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So who's ever going to want to play a human? Well, I kind of made the human's racial powers a little overpowered because he gets an extra slot on his power tray, and he gets to load out a fourth passive power for free just for being a human. So there's my bribe for people to play humans.
You throw a bone.
Yeah, actually, those powers are really good. I mean, an extra passive is huge, and an extra tray slot is huge. But our monster races are so strong, and even when you start looking at the elves, we have the Fae, which is an elf, and she's got wings, and she's going to get double jump and glide. So I mean, we've given all of our races really stylized, unique looks, and then the design team went and gave them really unique and perhaps overpowered racial powers. So our mantra was hold nothing back with the races, because again, I think as a team and as kind of as an industry, we're kind of tired of the homogenous character where everybody is perfectly balanced against each other. It just leads to just this feeling of sameness with everything. And it means you can't make really fun racial things that are really powerful. Now, if you make everybody's things super powerful, then they all feel uniquely broken, and it's a hard choice.
It's
right?
Like that.
So
imperfect balance makes balance.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, we're not trying for perfect balance because we're not worried about people killing our raid bosses, which we don't have, in exactly 5 minutes to get the next piece of ultra loot. Right? That's not the game we're making. So we can let some of these things slide, or create paper, rock, scissors counters to them. So
yeah.
Since our equipment system, I just balanced jewelry stuff in this last week, and that's out in the 5.4 patch. Like Ganeshans get an extra ring slot, which doesn't sound like a lot until you start looking at the stats on the rings. The better stats are coming in 5.5, but all of a sudden a third ring slot's pretty cool. The High Elf gets an extra necklace, so they get to wear 2 amulets. The Centaur get an extra set of boots. I call them horseshoes. They're not actually armor boots, but they're horseshoes. Because I was always amused, like, they've got 4 legs. Why can't they wear 4 boots?
Right.
Right. So they get a horseshoe slot, which has an extra set of stats. So we've had a lot of fun because we haven't been constrained by trying to make everything perfectly equal to. It also lets us free our minds and really exercise the limits of our power creation tool, that we can just blue sky and say, you know what, I can make a really crazy power. And it's a lot of fun.
I love the Myrmidons myself. It's
our class with Berserk.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I'm
so
looking
Berserk,
forward to the Stoneborn.
Yeah, the Stoneborn are their beards are definitely trippy from my first sight of them. I think we put out a picture. Yep, we've got.
Yeah.
But theirs are made of roots. It's a little bit thicker than yours, but yeah, we've had a lot of fun building this stuff because really we haven't been constrained too much. So a lot of it is what is fun, and then I'll go ahead and I'll make a really broken fun power, and then Mark Hallish, who is my systems counterpart, he maintains the numerical balance. So he'll come through and he'll make the numbers work right for the crazy overpowered thing that I made. Right? Because I just like to make super fun powers, and I hope it shows in our classes.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of thought put into them, and we put a lot of thought into the disciplines and a lot of effort from the engineers to give us the tools such that we can make really cool powers. And at the end of the day, hopefully that will delight a lot of people. And then the way that they combine those powers will make a lot of fun things. And because disciplines are just kind of like our base unit of content for advancing progression of your powers, I can have a fun idea like, you know what? Let's make totems a thing. And if you think of like shaman totems, I don't need to make a shaman class. I can make a discipline called shaman, and it has 4 powers, and those 4 powers each draw a different totem type. And I can make that work, and it only takes a fraction of the amount of time that it would take us to make a full class.
Yeah.
So that for us is really exciting because we have a lot of, like I said, I made Bard over a weekend, 1 week, and then the next weekend it was funny. I came back and I made Troubadour, which is 4 offensive songs. So the Bard songs are all defensive and about group healing and speed buffs and armor class and armor buffs, whereas the Troubadour songs are all about AoE snares and debuffs and damage, kind of the yin and the yang of the song universe. But because I did that as a discipline, it was something that didn't take an incredible amount of investment in either technology or art from the team, and players love those the disciplines. So
Yeah.
it's really exciting as a designer working on this team.
Yeah, I remember the feedback off the Bard, and people were like, "Oh, this class is this is just strong. This is just working out."
Yeah,
So-
in fact, it's so popular now. Todd wants us to make a class at some point and actually make a full-blown class out of it. So, I mean, and that's also a good way to take a litmus test of how popular a mechanic is.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to invest in a full class. And what's even cool about Crowfall at that point is even if it was a class, because you can vessel jump at the crypt, you can try it out, and you'll still have a bunch of progression that you did that from passive training on the Crow.
Well, if people get worried about hearing about like, oh, the classes, making them stronger and making them powerful and not really having a regard for that, keep in mind, doesn't matter. Like one day to the next, your gear can be great and someone can kill you. A group can kill you. It's just, it's that type of game. It isn't like WoW where you get a bunch of gear and you're now like at the top of the food chain with an item level and you're one-shotting people. You can lose that gear. So it doesn't matter.
Or somebody comes up with a really interesting build.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing is, in Shadowbane, a lot of people hid what their builds were because they didn't want word getting out of some combo that they had figured out. And the stream that you and I were watching the other night was that he was playing a Wood Elf Ranger, and that assassin just came up and obliterated him. And he had some experience. He's like, I know there's a stealth guy here. And yeah, so there can be somebody who's literally the paper to your rock, and they just catch you, and that happens. I mean, the assassin is great at those solo kills. So, as he found out.
Rock, paper, lizard, Spock, or whatever.
Yes.
You've mentioned a lot of different things that were, nice to see as a developer and watching the streamers and things like that. What are some of the high points of the game as you guys work on it, seeing players come in and test and stuff? What's the most exciting for your whole team?
Well, so that experience I described earlier, which where I saw pieces of the game actually start to function like a game rather than a test. So that to me was us reaching another level of we've kind of climbed out of the muck, so to speak, right? We're crawling out of our primordial development ooze, and we're kind of walking around on land now. And to see some of the assumptions that we made play out true, that is super exciting. I mean, that invigorates everybody, because it means that the light at the end of the tunnel is there, and that once we have everything stood up, things are going to work. I mean, yeah. It's always it's always a shot in the dark until you see that things that you are building are yielding that fruit. So for me, that was a huge pump earlier in the week when I saw that happening. And
awesome.
And what's funny is we kind of forget, because I'm already knee deep in 5.5 and have been for a couple of weeks. I forget all the things that we built within one development cycle. So you guys had been playing 5.3, and then 5.4 came out, and I was like, wow, the players haven't seen the leveling system for the vessels yet. But we've been playing with it for weeks, and we're like, well, why aren't they sacrificing those things? Oh yeah, that system's not on live yet. So it's definitely great to see those things come in, and people appreciate them and feel really good about them.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we can keep making it gratifying for your guys' hard work. We're gonna open up now. Because we're on Pow'Er Hours overtime, and there's a lot of questions. We're gonna get through them as quickly as we can, so we can make sure we answer everybody's. And it was asked on Reddit: are you still pursuing the goal of having some kind of fake or real physics in combat as described in the Kickstarter, especially projectiles instead of raycast? I shot this one at you earlier.
Mm-hmm. So right now we still have projectiles, and we have a handful of them, and primarily they are powers that you have to charge up, which means that you're rooted. And the reason we do that is because we're trying to sync the server and the player to the exact location. So when you shoot that fireball, it comes out of your hand. Because our combat is so mobile, we have a lot of raycasts in there, so it actually looks good. Because if we were to do that with projectiles and a player was strafing, meaning they're moving straight this way, what they don't know is on their client, on your machine at home, you're moving this way. On the server, it's slowly following you, so it's moving like this. So what ends up happening when you shoot a projectile, the server actually fires it from the location, which means if you're strafing, you're still moving, it fired it back here. The fireball appears 7 or 8 meters to your left, depending on internet latency and all kinds of things, and it just looks like crap. It just looks awful. I mean, your syncing is wrong. People don't understand why. They're like, oh, that's the game where things just fired out of people's hands, and it never fired out of people's hands. So things like that, we make raycasts. If we're going to have you shoot a projectile, we have you stand still, which allows those two things. You stop here, and this thing moves into you. So when you shoot, it looks good, and we will continue to do that. We don't like mobile moving projectiles because it just looks bad. As for physics, there's a whole lot of physics stuff that we are constantly adding and tweaking to make, because we still have player-to-player collision where you just don't walk through another player. you're colliding with them. The destruction of our walls is all physics. You're firing projectiles from catapults. The catapults hit the wall and they explode. And they look good because the catapults right now don't move. And if they did move, they were moving very slow. But we are constantly working at those things. So the plan is to still keep them in and not fully get rid of all of them.
Okay. Shout out to Anthrage, who's been in chat, giving information on a lot of the questions we're about to ask. Been doing their best to answer the questions in chat while we've been chatting here. So we're still going to ask these questions, though, in case anybody missed it through the chat window. Racklevin asked, do weapons and armor break down over time? Kind of went over that, but yet.
Yep.
Real Gaffer asked, are keeps preset on a map, or are users able to start their own keeps where they want?
So for our two different modes right now that we're working at building, one is called God's Reach, which is the 3-team faction setup. And because we don't want people on your own team griefing you, everything is pre-built. Because otherwise people are people and they would just ruin a team because they could. In the dregs, nothing is pre-built and people will be building them where they want to. And that is because if someone on your team is being a dick, you can kill them. So if everyone in the village says, this guy's a jerk, kill him on sight, he's going to stop coming around. And if he does something stupid, like put a wall in the middle of an area that it shouldn't be, you can blow it up. So the reason we have the two different sets is because some people aren't comfortable with full loot PvP and they may just want to stay in God's Reach. But in that campaign mode, we need to provide anti-griefing mechanics so people aren't jerks to each other.
Okay. If I murder anybody's names here when I read these, I apologize ahead of time. Forgive me. With that said, Matthew, why do druids have a one-shot mechanic but no other classes have no other classes can have one shot?
I think calling it a one-shot mechanic is a little over the top. It's not like they're stealthed and they hit you with an ambush and you instantly keel over. Right now we have these physics orbs that we drop down, and it probably takes about a good 30 to 45 seconds to lay down enough orbs. And basically the orb is at least a 1 second to 1.5 second cast. You have to put 15 of these things down. And then they have another mechanic where they literally have to swap trays and cast another power that you can very clearly see that they're casting. The orbs will appear for 1.5 seconds and all go off. Now, the amount of times I've seen people actually take damage from that is very minimal. But on the other hand, if they're able to line it up and root somebody in there or do it in a smart location like the breach of a castle, they're able to do a lot of damage. So we'll constantly looking at damage, but also one of the things that contributes to that right now is people are running around with like 5% armor, and we've budgeted for up to 75% mitigation. So they're playing a game with very little to, if any, mitigation values. So of course everything does ridiculous damage at that level. Things are going to start coming down as soon as they actually start getting the advanced armors, and there's another 30% mitigation available from the skill trees. So I think it won't happen at the end game. I can't say that it's not going to happen. By the time people are more trained and the game is further along, but when everyone's running around with sticks just beating each other on the head, I can see things like this happening.
Yeah. Next up, Banjo Slaughter. Can you have mayors?
Sure. So that would actually be the lord of a eternal kingdom. And if I let you come into my kingdom and say you can have this parcel, and I let Anthrage into my kingdom and say he can have this parcel, you guys put stuff down, I as the world owner get taxes from you. So if you were to put vendors down, every time something's sold on your vendor, a portion of that value would feed up to you as well as me. So I could set a tax on the world, or I could just literally say, hey man, you owe me 5,000 gold every week. Pay up. And there's a little bucket that you put the $5,000 in. So yes, in that sense, I am the mayor of a probably equating it to Galaxy style, but I'm the lord of this eternal kingdom. You guys all owe me taxes, or I will kick you out. Which is pretty much what a mayor does. And he makes rules, right? Like don't put a busted out Ford on the front of your lawn. Make sure your house looks good.
Oh God.
Things like that. Make sure your vendors are stocked. Don't have any empty vendors.
Oh. How do you go about getting the land? Is it all able to be settled? And what's the dimensions like?
So the dimensions of our worlds are right now 40 by 40 of our new cells, which is roughly 4,000 kilometers. So 4K by 4K is a very big world. How do you get the land? There's a bunch of resources you can harvest, and then via the crafting system, you can craft land parcels, and you craft small parcels, and then you can use those smaller parcels and more resources to make even bigger parcels. Because if you remember, every land parcel is shaped like a Tetris piece. Mm-hmm. And the smallest Tetris piece is a 1x1, and we have some of those L-shaped ones, and we have some zigzaggy ones that are like 9 parcels. So you craft the land. I think our older Kickstarter packages have a bunch of parcels that come with them. Our current packages might have some in there as well. I haven't looked in a while. So there's multiple ways to get them. I'm pretty sure everybody gets a couple free pieces with their package.
Awesome. Real Gaffer asked, is the plan for people to be able to just build their own characters as they like and be useful? Or will there be really specific routes for people to take to be useful in PvP?
That depends on your friends. Right? It really does. Because a lot of people are like, okay, all right, Blix, you're playing the healer. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go build the healer that I want. And some groups are like, nope, you're playing the druid healer with a friar and pixie disciplines because that's the best. Because I read it on a forum, and the forum says that that's the best. Right? So a lot of it depends on your friends. I'm sure people will come up with what's the best because that's the first thing people ask when they go into a game. What's the best? What's the best DPS? So
Stack crushers.
I'm sure people will do math and make spreadsheets, and they'll kind of boil it down, and you may not be able to extrapolate everything into a spreadsheet, is our hope.
Good.
So hopefully people come up with some unique combos, and your friends aren't a total jerk and make you play exactly what they say you're going to play. Now, that being said, because of the vessel system, you could always go put the druid with pixie and friar on cold storage, essentially, and jump into your Minotaur Myrmidon if you want to go around and roll around the world. Right? You just have to go to the crypt, swap the vessel that you're playing, and there you go. So I think people will have a spread of vessels, I hope, and they're constantly working on different exploration mechanics to they're exploring which is the coolest for them and which play style they enjoy the most.
I love it. Can you lose these vessels?
Right now, no. Just because there's a lot of effort going into them, and the way our code is set up right now, they can't be looted. They're not considered inventory loot, because right now all we're allowing on our current play, our current campaigns are all God's Reach, which means they're 3 factions, which only allows for inventory looting. So anything that you have equipped and your vessel is equipped can't be looted.
Okay. Is there a way to repair your crafted items so you don't lose them, and other than being looted off of you?
So we haven't built the repair mechanic yet, and we're still debating on how we exactly want to do that. Because since we put in sacrifice, we now have a way to throw away old stuff when it's getting low, or we should have a way to go get new stuff with vendors in the upcoming publish. So we're not quite sure how that loop is going to work exactly, because the danger there is, and this is something we ran into on Galaxies, is people could repair so often and so well that they never replaced their gear.
Yeah.
Right. It slowly got the max durability slowly went down over time, but it took an awfully long time to get that thing down such that it was non-repairable. Right. So every time you repaired it, if it started out as let's say you're repairing it at it's at 100 of 1,000. The first time you repair it, the max goes down to 950. So now you're at 950 of 950. The next time you repair it, it's now 900 of 900. And then when you get that one down, then you repair it up, it's 850 of 850. So the max is always coming down to such a point where you get down and it's like, oh, it's 100 of 100. So it's going to break really quick, right?
Yeah.
The challenge with that is to tune that such that things don't last forever.
Yeah.
Because in a system like that, they last a really long time. And we found that out on Galaxies.
Mm-hmm. And also, you know, for people, even repairing it, again, you're going to be able to have this stuff looted off of you. So, you know, don't repair it for the next guy just to take it off of you.
Yeah, it depends on where you're playing. So if you're uncomfortable with losing your stuff and you want to play exclusively in God's Reach, then repairing will be more of a thing you're worried about. The mindset that you have is probably that of a Dregs player who is used to losing their stuff all the time, so they really don't care.
Oh,
it
called me a loser.
It happens.
I know it does. It's inevitable.
So it just depends on where you want to play.
What's the scale of PvP?
So right now, what we've seen successfully is we've seen 15 on 15s, we've seen 25 on 25s, we've seen 5 on 5s. The challenge is as time goes by, our server can start to hold more and more people as the engineers optimize more and more. So we're starting to see bigger numbers. The 25 on 25 was an organized player event. So as more and more people join, more and more people log into play, as things become more and more fun, more and more people are going to stay in longer and play. So rather than just, we see a lot of people pop in right after we do an update, and they kind of see what's new and then they take off. Or some people will take off for 4 or 5 months. And we understand we are in a pre-alpha state. The full game isn't wired up, and there's a lot of things else to check out. So a lot of people will tend to kind of check it out, and they'll go away for a little while. And then we have this audience of really hardcore fans, and they're there every day. Every time the server's up, they are online, and they're feeding us a lot of useful feedback. So we have all kinds, and the population will increase as it becomes more and more of a game.
Awesome.
But we anticipate the sieges will have those hundreds of people participating in a siege.
Okay. All right. That's fantastic. Before we close out, is there any final thoughts or words from you that you'd like to get out there?
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks everyone for offering feedback and bugs and things like that on the forums. It really helps us out. And if you're interested in early game development, you should clearly check us out. If you're the kind of person who only likes to play a finished thing, we totally understand. And you can stay away for a while. And when the game is more mature, feel free to come in. It's just a lot of our early adopters have more knowledge of how things work, and they know lots more of the in and outs of the game. So if you're interested and whenever you feel comfortable, feel free to check us out. I think our minimum pledge is to get in our current stage is $50.
Yep.
Which at that point you're buying the game for the future anyways. You may or may not have interest in it. Again, at this point, right? So certainly if you're buying it, you'll have interest for it in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
But you may be the person who just gets turned off by, if you played any other early access title and you've just been like, man, this thing's not even built yet. Yes, we're at an even earlier stage than that, whereas we've just built a bunch of our game systems and now we're slowly starting to stitch them together so it feels like a game.
And it feels good. I'll put my neck out there and tell you guys I pledged $200 on this quite a few years ago, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I've been in and out of it, just watching it grow and develop. And the 5.4 was, I hopped in and I played as soon as I could
with that because I had to get my 2-time authenticator fixed. Thanks to Gordon on that. And it's smooth. It feels good. It looks great. I love the art style. The stylized graphics are my favorite, and that is a selling point for me right off the bat to just even look at a game. So I'm really happy with that. And you guys, $50 is it's an consider it an investment. It's worth it. I want to thank ArtCraft, Crowfall team, Thomas Blair, Blixtev for being part of this show and creating something that a lot of us are very excited to play. And everyone, be sure to hit up their website and their YouTube channel, check out some more information and things on it. Give them a follow on the Twitters. Give me a follow on the Twitters. Give the Shed team a follow on the Twitters. It's important. We get a lot of information out there, and thanks to the Shed team, you guys made it a great night for us. And have a great night. And I'll see you guys next time on the next Pow'er Hour.